I feel like one of the first thing that comes to my mind is the way people introduce themselves. And that's the first lesson I would like to share with you. Introduction with love is one of the lessons that I have taught from the very beginning of my career. Since I was 17 years old, I have been teaching human wisdom around the world. And this is a lesson I never skip. So, my request to you is for a second here, if I ask you to introduce yourself, think in your minds, what would you say? If I say, hey, tell me more about yourself, what would you say? Would your introduction of yourself be laced with what you're doing, where you live, or will it be much more beyond that? Now, let me tell you, having taught more than 400,000 people across 26 countries in person and more virtually, I have noticed that every time you ask someone to introduce themselves, people often list down a series of their accolades. They read their resumes, and most certainly, they start by telling you what they do, not who they are. So, I remember this one time I was at a youth leadership forum, and a guy who was a very, very senior vice president of a corporate was introduced to me in the hotel alley. And I asked him, he asked me certain questions. I asked him certain questions. And I said, okay, now tell me about yourself. And he said, well, I am the vice president of the corporate sales division of so and so company. And I smiled at him and I said, I have been never a vice president of anything. Could you tell me more about yourself? So he added on to say, well, I am a mentor to 4 startups that have a turnover of XYZ number. So I smiled again and I said, I have never, seen a turnover because I've never been a mentor to a startup firm. Could you tell me more about yourself? So he said, well, I am the chairman of the Rotary Club of so and so district. And I said, I've never worked with Rotary. Could you tell me more about yourself? The oscillation of that conversation went for about good 15 minutes. And I kept on asking him about himself and to tell me more about who he was. But what he was understanding repeatedly is what he did, what would impress me as an accolade, as something phenomenal that he had achieved marvelously over the strength and the spectrum of his career. Now, the interesting fact here is when you introduce to someone what you do and not who you are, it kind of creates this lag, because introducing with details is the easiest thing in the world to do. You say your name, you say a couple of titles here and there, and that's about it. But introducing with love and not details is one of the hardest thing in the world to do, because it requires for you to take a pause, a moment of self reflection, and serve to somebody what will remain true, hopefully throughout your life, and has remained the truth so far. So if I tell you, everybody, I am an executive producer. I used to be one, but I'm no longer. I'm a lyricist in Bollywood. I'm a poet. I'm a kindness ambassador to UNESCO MGIP. I am so many things that I did not know almost 5 to 10 years ago when I introduced myself to people. But I remember since I was in school, I always told people I am someone who believes in the potential of other people. I'm curious about the humankind. And people who met me in school, who were my classmates, when they meet me today, they still remember that about me. And that becomes sort of a benchmark of who you are as a person, because the things you do will constantly evolve over time. You may not be a director today. Who knows? You might be. You might be a techie today, and tomorrow you wish to write a novel and you become a published author. So what you do constantly can change because basis on your circumstances, your learning, your attributes, and your position in society and your own skill set. So introducing with love is one of the most fun processes, because I remember teaching at a college in Paris, and I asked my students to write a love letter. And most of the students, got onto the job. But one of the students said, sir, can I write an executive summary instead? Now, this might seem like a very small thing, But when a student, almost an age of 24, 25, instead of writing a love letter, asks you to replace it with an executive summary, it is a cause of concern. Because that means in a couple of decades, we will have MBA graduates who are going to call family reunion as team based meetings. They're going to call dating as test marketing, and they're going to call their own children as value added deliverables. And you don't want that to happen. You want people to be able to not verbalize the vocabulary of the jobs they do, but the vocabulary and the language of the lives and the cultures they have been brewed in and brought up in. That, I think, is one of the most important and imperative filters of living life beautifully. Well, that's the first lesson. Introduce with love. And I use that as a good test in life. Every time I meet a new person and the person says, "So tell me about you, Deepak," I try to stick away from my resume, my CV, and I try to tell the person more about myself. And I try to see if on the face of the person, the look changes. If the person is still interested in who I am, instead of what they want from me. Because if they're really interested in hearing who I am, they will stick around, and this relationship, whether it's work, whether it's friendship, will be much more long term and productive. So that's one of the filter tests I use with people when I meet them. I have my first question here from Parikshit, who's saying, "Hi, Deepak. I believe there is a latent potential in every individual. If one needs to be successful in his, her, or profession, the key is unleashing the latent potential. How does one unleash?" Well, it's a wonderful question, but I would also say what seems like a latent potential to one person may be the dormant or the active potential for someone else. People channelize their inner values, their inner virtues, and their inner skills based on how they assimilate they want to serve the world. There is a huge demographic in the world that focuses so much on the word calling. And you all might have heard how right? Find your calling, find your purpose, find your life's mission, your ikigai. These are all buzzwords and they're beautiful. But I must tell you, calling is not a pot of gold that you stumble upon in the journey of becoming yourself. It is what you develop, craft, and create over the course of your lifetime. Many people I have met around the world who are waiting for that one day they will wake up and discover what their calling is. It doesn't work that way. How it works is you do something that you feel a slight tinkling, a slight notion towards, and you work to explore if that liking towards something is becoming something bigger, is developing into something more meaningful. And then you keep doing it over time and you realize, this seems like the direction of my calling. So I tell people who, just in fact, last month I was at a forest festival in India and somebody asked me, what do I do until I find what my calling is? And I think I told the person, do everything you like. Try your hands in every single thing that your heart desires because you can do it guilt free. I'll tell you, the problem of the world arises not when we don't know what we are supposed to do on planet Earth. It arises when we do know what we are supposed to do here and do not do it. So people who say, I don't know what I'm here for, what my larger purpose is, I high five those people because it's the greatest privilege to be at a position of discovery, of exploration, of wanting to quest further on what all you could do. That means you could dive deep into many different things and come out of it with the learning experience so that when you do come out and about to what you were meant to do on planet Earth, you would have that additional wisdom of everything else that you learned and lived to apply. But most people don't do that. Most people stick around to sit and want one thing that they want to do, and that's about it. Also, the challenge in the 21st century lies with the old proverb, be a master of one trade and don't be a jack of all trades, be a master of one. I almost gag at that saying, and I may be the only one, but I find it absolutely redundant in the 21st century. Because to be a master of one means you will miss out on so many other learnings and lives that you could possibly experience. And the world will only make you feel bad about being a jack of all trades when you take it as an offense. I've been a jack of all trades all my life, and I can tell you, I have thoroughly enjoyed it without any shame. Because all these different trades that the jack delves into are smaller tributaries that realign to form a river or an ocean of your being. I started studying journalism in college. And before that, I was doing theater in school. When I started my organization, Project Fuel, and I started collecting life lessons of people from around the world, one of the interesting things that happened is I had tons of life lessons, just these prophecies and philosophies and quotes and proverbs and sayings and statements by people, but I did not know how to pass them on in a very, very simplistic, accessible, and consumable way with people. So I bought hands on information and learnings that I had learned in theater. I started using my knowledge of theater into designing people's life lessons into experiences, activities, and modules. And over the course of the last 10 years, that has become a methodology of its own, that I can take someone's life lesson from some part of the world and make it a very experiential part of curriculum of education systems. Now, people who called me jack of all trades in school because I was doing theater and poetry and active, writing and curriculum of dancing and all of that, did not realize it would come to help me all the way around. And last year, Project Fuel and my organization and my methodology was recognized as world's top 100 innovations in education. And I share that with you with the humble understanding that if you are consistently allowing yourself to take the learning of one domain of your experience into another, that is when innovation and creativity will result further than what it is supposed to be defined by the peripheral conditions of your professional job role. So, uh, people's latent potential, coming to that question, I think it can be unleashed in two ways. One, when you don't glorify inspiration. And what I mean by that is just like calling and purpose in life, a lot of people glorify inspiration. I will talk about writing because I'm a poet, and a lot of people talk about poetry in that sense. They want to be in a beautiful cabin in the mountains with beautiful birds chirping, with a river that they can see as close from their sight of sitting. Their writing table should have every single colored pen onto place. And then they say the best poem would come. But it doesn't work like that. You can write poetry in a refugee camp, which I have done. You can write poetry in your kitchen. You can write poetry while flying in an airplane. So, inspiration is not for you to find and keep, it is for you to sow and reap. And for that to happen, you need to know that you don't have to glorify it. You don't have to say, when I have the best MacBook Pro or the latest MacBook Pro, I'm going to start my novel. When I have the best outfit to wear is when I'm going to go socialize at a party. Or when I have the best trekking shoes is when I'm going to go start a mountain trekking expedition. These are only excuses we tell ourselves to hold ourselves from the attempts we are going to make. So I think to unleash your latent potential, first is to not glorify inspiration. And second, which is one of my key life lessons, understand this: your talent is not your gift, it's your responsibility. So if you are aware that you have an iota of talent in any respect of the work that you can possibly do, and you do not do it, you are shying away from your responsibility. Because it was not given to you as a gift, it was given to you as a responsibility. And when we do take it as a souvenir gift understanding of a talent, we become moody with it. For example, if I can share life lessons it's a lockdown here in India because of the COVID-19, and it's almost 9 o'clock here at night. I might be heading to dinner soon. But if I think to myself, my ability to share life lessons that I have documented with people from all around the world is a gift, not a responsibility. I would not be sitting here on the Zoom call and talking to so many people out there in Mexico. But because I consider it my responsibility to pass on this knowledge and learning, here I am with all my excitement and all my learnings, because it still allows me to know that I was given the chance to experience lives of 400,000 people around the world with the notion that I can pass it on and to the best of my ability. So your talent is not your gift, it's your responsibility. And inspiration is not for you to find and keep, but to sow and reap. Those are my two humble suggestions on how to unleash one's latent potential. I'll take some more questions. Arturo Gracias is saying, I hear and understand that you listen when someone introduces him or herself, if as if they are happy, like a child describing what they want to be, and I could not agree more. If what you are doing, whatever it is, makes you happy, it is the best introduction of yourself. I think that's not a question, but a beautiful input. I completely agree with you, Arthro. But even to people who are not doing what makes them truly happy, I think that is the difference, that what still does as part of their personality, what about them, not their jobs, is the core essential thing they would like for somebody to know. An example I often share is from a friend named Siddharth Anantram, who introduced himself by saying, I am someone who will smile at you even if you don't smile back at me. Now imagine how powerful an introduction is that, because you can never forget it. And you can always check it when you meet Siddharth and see whether he smiles at you even if you don't smile back at him. So it becomes almost a life benchmark for Siddharth and for us. So these little introductions allow us to think beyond our immediate profile. Well, Omar, hi Omar. Omar asks, I would like to know for you which event in your life was the most important for you, the one that made you be like you are today. Wow, that is a very, very good question, Omar. And especially for someone like me, when someone asks me a question like that, my life literally goes flashes it in front of my eyes like a movie, and I'm trying to pick. But because you said one that made you be like you are today, I could tell you I was heavily bullied in my school. I was completely sidelined by most of my classmates in my growing up years. And I was heavily bullied for my voice. They said it sounded a lot like a girl and it sounded a lot like a kid. And so nobody in school wanted to be seen with a boy who sounded like a kid or a girl. And so I was constantly picked on for that, to the point that I really wanted not to go to school. But my parents were very determined that I had to finish my education. And I remember one time in class 11th, in grade 11th, which is, junior college, sophomore year, my best friend at the time refused to sit with me after lunch break because somebody had picked on me and picked on him because of me. And he said, I don't want to be seen with you because everybody is going to start bullying me too. I was so devastated that I started to cry. My English teacher at the time noticed that, took me out of the classroom, and she said, what happened? And I said, I think everybody hates my voice, and I think it's not what it's supposed to be. And she said, forget about everybody else. Do you like your voice? And I said, I don't know. So she asked me, well, if tomorrow morning you could not speak any longer, would you be okay with that? And I said, not at all. I want to speak. And she said, well, then it means you like your voice. And if you like your voice, that's a deal. If you like your voice, you own your story, and nobody in the world can make you feel bad about what you already are aware and embracing about yourself. That small phrase, own your story, revolutionized my entire life, because it made me think from that moment on that I do like my voice. I'm a school debater. I perform, I recite. I cannot do without my voice. And people who think it's too petite, it's too feminine, it's too kiddish, really can take a hike through a cactus, because I love hearing myself and saying what I need to say. So, my English teacher said that once you own your story, you cannot be reduced in the world. And I remember the very next day, I was bullied in the school corridor. For the first time in my entire life, someone called me a name. And instead of running away or crying, I turned back to the person and I said, I already know that about myself. When you have new information, do contact me. And it was so liberating because it allowed me to understand nobody can diminish you when you don't want to be diminished. So, people who are fat, people who are suffering from mental illness, people who have been abused will only fear the fear of vulnerability when they think it is they who are responsible for that abuse or that pain to happen to them. It is not that way. When you accept something about what has happened to you, it really liberates you. It accepts you to move forward and do something else with it. So that was a moment. Own your story. It allows me till today to enter the United Nations headquarters or the TED conference or some of the biggest platforms in the world that I've had a blessing to speak at, with a certain sense of confidence, because I'm not looking for validation anymore. I like who I am, and I'm carrying that story with me with a certain sense of ownership. So own your story is the thing that changed quite a bit of my life circumstance. I actually like this format. We are taking questions and answers, and I think I am passing on life lessons invariably. So if this is fine for all of you, I will not do my rehearsed speech with anyone. I think let's take the questions. Thanks, Deepak, for your response to my question. Very insightful and clear explanations with examples. Thank you so much, Prediction. We have Larry Brill, if I am pronouncing that right. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy for this meeting. I'm in Mexico now. Thank you, Deepak, for the wonderful words. You talked about the inspiration. We need inspiration. This world needs a lot of that. Really, all people have amazing talents. Now I found inspiration on TCL. Thanks, Darshan. Darshan, a shout out to you for being inspiration for each and everybody who's listening. I found inspiration in this meeting. Now, Deepak, can you give some advice to continue inspiring others, especially children? Oh, I love that. Children are the most, what would you say, most palpable, most observatory beings on planet Earth, because we kind of try to always put children as, oh, they're just kids. What do they know? You will be amazed at knowing some of the best life lessons in my life have been offered by children. I was in Belgium last October, and a 6-year-old boy named Abdul Rahman, I asked him, 6-year-old boy, I said, what do you think, Abdul, is your life lesson? And he said, before you learn how to ride a bicycle, learn where the brakes are. That's from a 6-year-old child. And I thought to myself, that is genius. Because what he's really saying in his very literal words of finding the brakes to your bicycle before you learn how to ride it is to find boundaries and limitations of something that you are taking on. Know where the control lies. Know how you can stop what you start. Define that peripheral boundary of working. And that will give you a certain sense of control over things and not just be consumed by it. Another 5-year-old girl years ago said to me, my life lesson, Deepak, is when you're done using the jar, remember to close the lid. Now, if you just hear it as that, it is when you're done using the jar, remember to close the lid. But that life lesson helped so many people post the Nepal earthquake in 2015 as a reminder that what was over had to be closed, had to be put a lid on so that you could move on. So when you're finished with something, you're finished with that. Try to put a lid on it and move forward. I love that life lesson. Children can offer insights which are not only authentic, but are also seared in some sort of credibility from how they see it, and they will simplify it for you. And the other quick learning is, which was shared to me by Sunita Garware, almost 72 years old. She said to me that be interested in everything. This, if for all of those of you who are parents or are going to be parents, or I think for everybody in the world, be interested with your children. And she shared a beautiful story about growing up, which I think is the biggest parenting hack in the world. You know, young children, she said, as young children, we would go to my father-in-law, my grandchildren, my children who were grandchildren of my father-in-law would go to him with drawings that they would sketch and would show him. And generally, when we see kids drawing, we say, "Oh, so beautiful, good job." That's about it. But she said her father-in-law would look at the drawing, suppose a landscape, there's a house, there is a tree, and he would ask the child, "Whose house is it?" And the child would say, think of something and say, "Oh, this is this person's house." So the father in law would say, "And how many rooms are there in it? Whose room is which one? Oh, there is a tree outside this house. Which tree is this? When does it bear fruits? Oh, there's a river flowing outside the house. Is the water cold? Oh, there's a bird on the tree. Which bird is it?" And all of these questions probed further for the children to know that the grandfather was interested in what they were sharing with him. So every time they came back with a new drawing, they would come back with more answers on why they selected somebody to have a particular room, which fruit was it, and why was it so. So being interested in what your children do and diving deep into it with a certain sense of curiosity, I think allows for everybody in a growing phase to know that they're cared for and that they matter. So that's my advice. Hi, Judy. Appreciate you sharing. What would be your advice for the bullies? Well, to the bullies, I I have been often advising people who've been bullied, but for those who are bullies, I would say there's a beautiful learning of the philosopher and sage Ramdas. And Ramdas says beautifully, I think, that when you go into a forest and you see trees, you accept them how they are. You look at a tree which is small in height, crooked, bended shape, and you say, this tree got less sunlight, and that's why it is a little dwarfed. And you see a tree that's broken from one branch, and you say, it must have battled a certain storm. So you accept all the trees in the forest for their individuality. You don't question them, you don't criticize them. You value the forest for all the differences and its uniqueness each tree holds. The same person, when he walks into the world, he looks at people and says, "You are too short, too fat. You are too bald, too thin. You're too tall, too dark," and starts to criticize and starts to pick on people. Ramdas says if we can attain the same behavioral change that we do in a forest with trees, we might be able to accept people for their individuality. So, all the bullies in the world, I think, need to understand, need to go into a forest first and spend a lot of time with trees and then come into the world and have that imagery align with people. I think that could be a good starting point for everyone. Um, Josh says Mahatma Gandhi said no one would hurt you without your permission. That's true. Josh, people would hurt you without your permission. You can choose to not them make you feel that they have hurt you without your permission, is what I would add to that. Anil says, I like your inspiring words. Thank you, Anil. I really appreciate it. Dheeraj Datta says, Hi Deepak, your journey has been inspiration to all of us, especially youngsters. My question is, what is the role of spirituality in your life? Secondly, what keeps you humble after achieving so much? Thank you, Dheeraj, for the two questions. The role of spirituality. Um, I think spirituality is two things for me. One is self knowledge, and second is the passing on of the self knowledge. Now, if we break that down, what is self knowledge really? To me, self knowledge is the cognizant understanding that there is more, always, to come from a place of abundance in the world. If you are always fearful that there's not enough money in the world, there's not enough Power, fame. Sorry, I have a cough, so if that might be bothering anybody, but if there's not enough power in the world, if there's not enough money, if there's not enough knowledge, that fear of the less, the scarce, will always ask you to be pitiful, revengeful, greedy, miserable. But if you operate from a place of abundance, there is always more to know about oneself. There is always more to understand about people. It allows you room to accept many things with, a certain sense of gravitas. So I think self knowledge for me is knowing there is more and operating from that point. And when you know there is more, you're already grateful for what you have. So gratitude laces or glazes the existence of self knowledge for me. And I think that for me is spirituality. It's not just religion, or it's not just meditating. It's working and operating from a place of knowing you will never be left empty handed, even when you have very scarce things. I think that definitely allows. To answer your second question, what keeps me humble after achieving so much? I don't know what so much really is, but I I think of my life and I think, if what are the bunch of things I can be boastful about? I can be boastful about that I know a lot, but do I know everything? That's not true. There's so many people in my life I have met who know so much more than me. The awareness of that automatically humbles down my egoistic self, knowing that I know a lot. When I think I am courageous because I have spent time with Syrian refugees in refugee camps, I have worked with the Maasai women in Tanzania, I have worked with kids in Afghanistan, and I think, oh, Deepak, you're really courageous. But I also know that there are women, as we talk, in the mountains of the Himalayas, carrying almost 20 kilograms and 50 kilograms and tons of weight on their back across stony cobblestone path as it hails and as it snows, to make sure that they're able to light a firewood into their kitchens to feed their children. I automatically understand that I am courageous, but not the most. And when you probably allow yourself to put the most beyond and as a prefix or a suffix to anything you do, you become egoistic. So my humility comes from knowing that there are fantastic people. I am an ordinary person surrounded by extraordinary people. People like me, my friends really liked me until they met my sister. She's more patient, more kind, more understanding, more knowledgeable. So when they meet her, they try to see that I'm only an iota of what they see as the extreme. And I think that kind of consciousness allows me to know that there is room to learn more. Well, we have about 20 more minutes, so I'm going to try take as many questions. Tell your secret of being so energetic. um, if you want to watch with your family, it's available on YouTube. All right, Darshan is helping with that. um, being energetic, my secret, I think that's actually another life lesson. I think you have to have a certain sense of enthusiasm for whatever you do. If I was not enthusiastic at 9 o'clock in the night to be speaking to you, it would have been a call that I would have regretted, looking back, thinking about a time in a lockdown when I said to doing a call with people in Mexico, my night, postponing my dinner and my bedtime. I don't want to regret that. So I think people who garnish their time with a certain sense of enthusiasm, if nothing else, walk away with enthused sense of being and knowing that they'll serve the best. So I always try to walk into rooms with enthusiasm. There are too many dull faces people have, and as Maya Angelou, the great African American poet, says, you can see people who walk as if they stuck the airplane glue on the back of their hands and stuck it to their forehead. The world isn't that tragic. We can cheer ourselves up with some sort of hope and optimism. So that's something that I try to remind myself with. Joe Jose, I think that's the name. When we are a child, we seem to enjoy each detail in our lives, sunsets, music, nature. As we grow up, we seem to lose this ability. Do you think is it possible to see things through same perspective as we are grown up, and how to achieve that? Well, I think it's possible. It's way a lot harder because the world tries to make a cynic out of you when you do those things. They call you dreamy, they call you imaginative, they call you far beyond reality, they call you, not connected to pragmatism. But I think it is possible, and one can try to do that or polish that skill or retain it by retaining a sense of wonder. So when you step out on your street today, or you look out of your window, if you are also a lockdown, in a lockdown and quarantining yourself, look out the window and look for the small things. Try to see what's the smallest thing that brings you joy. And if you cannot, then there is a cause of concern. Then you are really marred and filtered by the big things, the big football matches, the celebrities, the big paycheck, the boss who will write that appraisal email. If you're awaiting those things, it's problematic. But if you look out of your window right after this call and you can find 5 things that bring you joy, I think there's nothing to worry. So it's a small test you can do with yourself. The 5 small wondrous things that you can find right outside your window. Um, and really do it as an activity every day. Every evening when I go onto my terrace, I try to, see things around. I take walks to notice very simple things. Leaves. Have you ever noticed? I was once in a conversation with a woman who said, "Do you ever notice how 2 colors in a flower merge?" And up until that point, I had appreciated flowers, but I had never ever paid attention to how 2 colors merge themselves on a flower petal. And when you do get a chance to look at one, try to notice that you cannot differentiate one where one begins and where one ends. That's the beauty of finding smallest of wondrous joys like children. Thank you, Vikramaditya, for your wonderful comment. And last few questions, and then I can share a couple of quick life lessons to wrap the call. Thank you, Dheeraj, for your wonderful appreciation. If you help me understand how to be pragmatic and at the same time bring myself in a presentation, can you please let us know how we can take simple inspirational stories to children? Rasmita, I would say study a lot, read a lot online. There is so much. We live in an internet flood era. So there is so much of information and knowledge that is present online, but don't pass it on as it is to your children. Consume it and let yourself be the filter through which it's processed in a language your children understand, in expressions your children see, and then pass it forward to them. Now, let me tell you, I was in Mexico, in Tulum, in the year 2016. I was invited for a conference, and I went to see the great Mayan ruins in Tulum. And on my way back, one of my friends, Ollie, pointed out to 2 trees called Chichem and Chaka. And she said the funny thing about Chichem and Chaka is that, of course, one is a poisonous tree, it gives you blisters and causes bad rashes. And one is the cure, the ointment. If you use it on the boil, it actually heals it. And I was so fascinated because even back here in India, we have something called the bichu ghas, which is the sting plant. And most people, when they touch it, they get this crazy irritable sensation and they run to a doctor without realizing that the cure for that sting, its relief, is right next to it, is another plant that you take and you rub, and it actually cures that. Now, the sting and relief relationship in nature, for someone like you who is in Mexico, is so beautiful to teach your children, because the lesson behind this is that the solution to the problem you are trying to tackle is always around it. Whether it's maths you're trying to teach them, whether it's drawing, whether it's anything creative, even in football, you'll see that the teammates you need to trust, the goalpost you're trying to hit, everything is around. And I feel there is a beautiful lesson in that folk story. And Of course, the Chichem and Chaka trees have a beautiful backstory to them about two brothers who were kings, fell in love with the same woman, and killed each other in a warfare, and asked the Mayan gods to allow them to see their love, their mutual love, one last time. And so, as an offering, the Mayan god said, "I will allow for you two trees, of you two brothers to grow as two trees, arms in arms." So you'll see that many Chechem and Chaka trees share the same roots and the same flower grows on them. It's a representation of the love that they shared for that queen. So that's a beautiful story. And it is an anecdote that culturally is around you. You can use that, filter that, and pass it on to your kids to be able to see in many beautiful ways. How to overcome a bad attitude or habit, um, and start fresh, keeping the motivation to do not get back to it. And another question that I'm taking is, have you ever gone through a phase of anxiety or depression? What would be your advice for someone who's always worried about tomorrow instead of enjoying tomorrow today? Well, to say, uh, for anybody in the world they haven't gone through anxiety would be a total lie, because to be human is to be anxious, and anxiety to a degree of despondency and helplessness is depression. So to answer your question, I have never been depressed, but I have been anxious. I was just anxious this afternoon because I was thinking, when will this lockdown get over? I travel 25 days a month, and what are the ways I can serve people? I was anxious about that. But in moments like those, I think what helps are two things. One is reminding yourself that you are not alone. We feel anxious when we think we are the only one going through this feeling. So now, thinking about it this afternoon, I realized the entire world, for the first time in our generation, is going through the same fear and has been overcome by the same challenge, if you see it. Otherwise, there is a war in Syria, there is gender imbalance in India, there is an earthquake in Nepal, there is Taliban in Afghanistan. There are constantly different individualistic challenges that the world tries to overcome. But for the first time in this generation, at least, we all have feared the same coronavirus, and we all are trying to fight it together. And that was a reassurance to me, honestly, because I thought, all right, I am not alone in this. And the second is, find somebody who listens to you, talk to somebody, and be honest about what is making you anxious. I talk often to my sister, to my friends, and I call them up and I'm like, you know what, I'm feeling so bad, or I'm feeling so anxious about something, and they'll say something or they'll hear me out, and that seems to help. That sort of a reminder. The other thing I do, which is my trade secret, but I'm happy to share it with all of you, considering Darshan has put in so much effort for this. I have something called the first aid kit for the soul. And what is a first aid kit for the soul, really? Whenever you are happiest in your life by anything, you know that you're happy. You can't deny it. When you watch a YouTube video that makes you laugh uncontrollably, when you listen to a song that you makes you feel like you're taken care of, it comforts you. When you read something that is profound and makes you think, aha, that's the truth. I try to save all of that. I have a Google Gmail folder called First Aid Box for the Soul. It has nearly about 25 videos, Oprah Winfrey's talk show, Maya Angelou's commencement speeches, James Baldwin, Tori Morrison, some of my favorites that I've heard over the years. It has about 50 plus good quotes from authors that I've read. It has nearly about 11 songs that I love. And it has a list of 11 people that I can call at any point of time who will hear me out. Whenever I start to feel anxious beyond control, I go and start watching those videos. And at the end of the videos, if I'm still not feeling well, I try to play the songs. And when the songs get over, I try to read the 50 quotes. If the quotes don't help, I call the first person on my list and try to make them understand and share what I'm feeling. If that doesn't help, I call the second person if the first person is unavailable. Now you realize by the whole activity ends, I have spent the last 3 hours doing things I love, I like, and speaking to people who understand me. So, what invariably happens is I feel nothing is that bad. There are still things that rejoice me. There are still things that make me feel belonged. And having spent 4 hours with things you like, I can tell you no anxiety stands a chance if it's manageable and controllable. But if it's, of course, elevating to a degree, I absolutely suggest taking professional help, speaking to people who can be more consistently available for your nurtured growth. So, yeah, make your own first aid kit for the soul. And it's very much like the first aid kit for your health emergencies. It really helps. All right, everybody. Last two questions, and then I can probably share few end lessons. Girish says, excellent session, Deepak. Thank you so much. What would be your advice for people like the 12th man in the cricket team waiting for long to get into playing 11? Well, all of us, somewhere in life, Girish, are the 12th man, whether we accept it or not. It could be in our families, it could be in our job roles, it could be in friends who don't let us pay or who ask us to pay always, who always need something. The bigger question to ask is, what are the places in life you don't mind being the 12th man in? And if you're okay with those places, then those things are worth it. But if you're not okay with being even the 12th man in the room, then I think one needs to really ask oneself, uh, do I belong here? Do I need this? Am I worthy of it? And is it worth it for myself? Because to be honest, there are places in the world you don't mind being the 12th man in. And those are the things that kind of push you in the direction of what truly is your calling. As a teacher, I have been in classrooms around the world, and many a times I allow for my students to take lead and teach. And I don't mind being even the 44th person who gets to talk, because that's where I feel I truly belong. But if you are the 12th man and you want to change that position, I think you need to ask, who are the people who will help you move forward? Who are the people who will let you take a chance, take a lead? And then speak to those people and be very clear about it. That's the other thing I've realized in this world. We, as people, don't have enough time to read between the lines. God help us if we have time to read the lines themselves. So, what you want, what you desire, and what you seek, make it very crystal clear. Verbalize it. Don't let people take their own interpretations home. Tell people what you mean to them. Ask them what you mean to them. Tell them what you think they mean to you and where you think you should belong. And if the question is in specific relation to work and giving opinions, I follow the rule of three. What's the rule of three? The rule of three is, if you're in a group discussion or in a presentation in a company and three people have spoken, now is your cue to talk. If you talk too much, allow for three people to speak before you. And that's always a good mandate. If you think people always see you as this over talkative, over enthusiastic person, the rule of three helps. Allow three people to go before you. And if three people have already gone before you and you're an introvert, shy, quiet, now is your chance to speak up. Three is always a good mix to that ingredient. So the rule of three. Well, very difficult name to pronounce. Marion. Oh, Mario Enrique Valijo. I hope you're not going to ban me from coming to Mexico if I pronounce that wrong, Mario. But I would like to take up your question. Hi, Deepak. How can we build up resilience, not only for ourselves, but our families and friends amid this coronavirus pandemic, which is unprecedented for most of us in our lives? What would you advise? Resilience. That's a beautiful, beautiful word. You know, Mario, the thing is, the reason we all feel so displaced in the COVID, pandemic is because most of us don't have the capacity to handle unexpected time. It's not something that we have rehearsed in our busy lives. We don't know what to do with time we did not calculate, times that we did not bifurcate into to do lists and into bucket lists and into schedules. There is suddenly this, of course, fear of what is going to happen and death and life and healthcare. But beyond that, for most of us who are in the bounds of our home and watching a Zoom call, we are privileged. But we have this big block of time that we now need to chip off. And this is unexpected time that we don't know what to do with. So I often return to the life lesson a beautiful theater artist called Zohan Petit in Belgium taught me. He said, stop at the red light. What does that mean? He said that most of my life, Deepak, growing up, I would jump red lights. As soon as I would leave home, even if the light was just turning red from the orange, I would skip it because I had to be somewhere and I was always in process to be somewhere. And I realized that when we don't stop at a red light, uh, in absolute calm, it's a great indicator of what our life is going through. Because when you stop at a red light and you're not anxious to reach somewhere, means you left home on time, means you have enough time to get somewhere, means that you were disciplined enough to plan it and schedule it in. So the simple act of stopping at a red light allows you to see the world rush around you because it's something that you didn't calculate for. Stopping at a red light without being anxious can also be form of a meditation. And ever since he shared that life lesson with me, I think it's one of the most genius things I've ever heard in my life because you can practice resilience in many ways with patience at a traffic light. To be for 60 seconds of unexpected time, pause, think of your favorite song, look at people, look at the world rush by, and take stock of everything that is around you. And when that happens, I think we could use this pandemic time to prepare ourselves for the world that we are going to go back into. The second thing I would like to say to you from my experiences, you know, the pandemic seems like a big change. It's going to be in many ways for the economy, for the people, for the way social sectors work, for the way we operate. But also, we will go very quickly to the competition, to the chase. And I don't say it with a hint of pessimism. I say it with a hint of pragmatism. In 2017, I painted a village on a glacier. And let me tell you, it takes you 3 days by all means of transport to get to that village. And I spent a month and a half with a team of artists painting that village. Not only the 3 days that takes to get there, the village had no electricity, no road, no internet, no telephone connection, nothing. For 1 month and a half, I lived in absolute disconnection to civilization and the larger humanity. And after a month and a half, when I came down from that village, having finished the project, I was so disoriented because the first honk I heard annoyed me. I saw a light. Can you imagine? Like we just flick a switch on. I saw a flash of light and my eyes hurt because I had not seen electricity for over a month. On the click of a button, I had hot water. In the village, I had to go to the forest and collect firewood to be able to heat water to drink. So it took me 2 weeks um, and to come back to orientation with the world. And my phone, as you can imagine, was on silent mode and airplane mode for over a month and a half. So my co-artist Purnima Sukumar and I both had promised that when we come back, we're going to put our phones together off the airplane mode, simultaneously. So we did that. My phone buzzed for 26 minutes straight. There was constant ping, 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 ping of WhatsApps and emails. And most emails started by saying time sensitive in block letters, urgent, important. And I turned to my assistant and I laughed, saying, what happened to these people? I hope they're alive. Because somebody who sends you an email with written time sensitive as subject in block letters a month and a half ago and doesn't hear back from you for over a month must have had some sort of an attack, right? But that wasn't the case. The world survived and sufficed just fine. And even though I know I'm one of the busiest people that I know in my life, the world still managed to move forward just as it was. And slowly, I was back into flying constantly, into talking around the world, in teaching, in painting, in writing, and being busy again. So, what I carry back from that glacier experience is not that I will switch off my phone for 1 month and a half. That's not possible. I understand that now. But what I do try to remember is the essence of the stillness I felt in that 1.5 months. So when days become overtly crowded with emails and constant phone pinging, I try to put my phone on an airplane mode for an hour and a half. And I try to remind myself the world will still be all right when I come off the airplane mode, because it was after I got off 1.5 months. So when we get after the COVID pandemic into the world again, what we can try to do is carry the stillness and the luxury of time and this new conscious desire to be resilient with us so that we can do better. It's a long answer to your short question. Apologies for that. But we have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to take one last question. Uh, and then probably wrap it up. So I'm trying to see, can you say something on how to manage your anger? Manoranjanji, thank you. And with that, let me share 2 key life lessons with all of you. The first one is try to relate to everything with a sense of humor. That's a life lesson that changed my entire viewpoint and relationship with the world. Because most of the time we are angry and upset and offended when things do not go as we intended them to be. Now, when you try to relate with a sense of humor, you try to create a margin for things that you did not, accumulate for or assimilate for or take into consideration. This is a life lesson that came from a girl during the Syrian refugee crisis that I was working with in France. Um, and she said, Deepak, if you try to relate with a sense of humor, like if somebody once called my nose, on a comment on Facebook, said, it looks like a dead rat. Now, I can tell you that's a pretty offensive comment to write on any stranger's profile. And if I take that to heart, I can be very, very angry, which I think I was for that moment. But then I try to remind myself, if I relate to it with a sense of humor, I don't have to take the burden of it. So I instead laughed and said, I cannot believe of all the things I'm saying in this video, somebody took the time to pause the video, see my nose, and then think to themselves, which animal or reptile is his nose closest to? And you almost laugh at it, right? Because another human being in some part of the world found the time to think your nose looks like a dead rat. uh, it's funny, but it can be tragic and it can be angersome if you choose to make it that way. So I try to relate with a sense of humor when it comes to anger. And this last lesson that I want to share with all of you is from a place called Mukti Bhavan. I want to tell you about this place in India called Varanasi, where people, it's a very holy city and people there check in to die. In the Hindu mythology, it's believed that if you take your last breath in the city of Kashi or Varanasi next to the holy river Ganges, you will attain salvation or moksha. That's the belief system in the mythology. And so, over the course of history, many salvation homes sprung up into the city where people checked in to die. And there were 8 originally, now there are only 3 left. And there is one particular place called Mukti Bhavan where people check in to die. And the interesting fact about Mukti Bhavan is it only gives you 2 weeks to stay. So if you don't die within 2 weeks, you have to check out. And when I heard that the first time, I really laughed because I thought not only do you have to make peace with the fact that you're going to die, but that you have to decide that you only will live for 2 weeks. And if you don't get to die in that salvation home. So I went there and I spent 10 days with people who were absolutely sure they were going to pass away in 2 weeks. Three of them actually did. What an accurate assumption of death. But also, in the same place, I met Mr. Bhairav Nath Shukla, who is the manager of Mukti Bhavan for 44 years. And he has served 12,000 people in their last moments. 12,000 people, can you imagine that figure, have passed away in his arms. I mean, it's just a number when you hear it like that, 12,000. But if you try to visualize the face and the name to every person in that 12,000, you can spend almost a month doing it. So I asked Mr. Shukla what the 12,000 deaths or lives had taught him. And he shared a beautiful, beautiful lesson. And he said, resolve all conflicts before you go. And what he meant by that is not just resolve all conflicts before you go, that means when you die, but even when you go to your bed, resolve all conflicts when you end your day. He said, Deepak, all 12,000 people in one way or the other who came to him had someone they wanted to say sorry to or someone they wanted to accept sorry from. And it was only in the very last days of their life they took a chance on saying so or accepting so. And so he said his biggest learning was that life is going to be full of conflicts. You're going to hate some people, you're going to dislike some people, you're going to be in argument with some, you're going to be in absolute abolition of some. But as soon as you go to bed, try to ask yourself, can you resolve it in any way? And when I asked him, I said, it is not possible that you fight with somebody and then you just go calling them and say, I resolved the conflict. That's just not possible. He said, no, I don't ask you to give that person a call right away. What I do expect of you is to draft a text message saying, it's all right, I understand. And don't press the send button till you feel ready. But just the act of drafting that message will allow for you to know you made the first step to resolving a conflict for yourself. And he said, that's a powerful move. I feel each one of us can do that in some manner when we are angry with things and people and places and situations we are confronted with. So Ilyana says, thank you, I loved it. Thank you, Ilyana. And each one of you who has tuned in from your respective homes, I thank you for taking out your time. I also thank Darshan for putting together this beautiful session and for being so proactive with my team and Mehak in coordinating this. Thank you so much, everybody. I really hope you all have a wonderful life. You have wonderful lessons. My only request to you all would be that we are collecting 1 million life lessons in the year 2020. That's one of the biggest goals I'm working towards with my team. So when each one of you finishes, I'm going to post the link to the Google form on the chat box or send it to Darshan. And I would love if all of you can put in your life lessons there and pass it on to us. We'll take it forward and travel all over the world, teaching people what you have learned in your life as you learned from some of the people today in this call. So do share your life lessons, and thank you so much for joining in. Goodbye and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Thanks for sharing your valuable time with us.
Darshan, we still can't hear you though.
Oh my God. Just 1 minute.
Darshan, you're on mute. You are on mute.
Let me unmute. Just 1 minute.
I think if you go to the bottom scroll of your tab, you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes. I think I have an iPad also.
Yes, hello. We can hear you though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Deepak, for sharing your valuable time. Uh, we almost have seen your previous videos on Facebook live streaming for multiple times. So many of us are aware about your TED talks, about your other videos, and definitely this session has been especially insightful as you have answered the questions. If time permits, in next quarter or earlier, probably you do come here and join with us. We will definitely enjoy your company being in Mexico.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so
I
much.
will request every one of us to share their life lessons with Deepak. And
Yes,
awesome.
please. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Deepak. And team B online, we would like to share the presentation with you. And with this, I think I will allow Deepak to continue with his other engagements. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I'm just sharing the link. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. So as we have seen that this is our session number 9, and the progress is steady, and we are moving forward with now enough like critical mass of like-minded people, and I'm very sure our team will increase. So what is next now? So as Mahatma Gandhi says, the small group of determined and like-minded people can change the course of the history. So even though we are a small group of the people, we have potential, and let's use this potential up to the max. We have started with this first screen, if you believe, in the first session. Uh, Here the eye and how to improve this eye, and then how we will move to V, and then how we will focus on one, that is U part. The explanation is written over here. I will be sharing the slides to those who requires it. What is next is these weekly meetings we will keep on continuing. We would like to ask everyone to prepare a one-page profile as a volunteer if you would like to actively take part in being a volunteer. I would like to each one of connect on a network with each other, write their articles with the hashtag the circle of legends, review each other's article, like them. Specific thing is comments. Only somebody writing it, we reading it, and we do not put that back to the person doesn't help. So just give me a minute. I think my iPad was disturbing me. So we should comment. We should request improvement. Then, if possible, we should prepare YouTube videos and share. Just like right now, the YouTube is happening. I think it is easy. Those who knows will teach. Otherwise, I'm there to teach you. We can upload into our channel. The profile of volunteer will look like this, and I is very active volunteer who is helping us design most of the graphics. She has designed our logo. Majority of our slides are designed by her or validated by her. So she is, in fact, my guide when it comes to several of the things which requires her input. This one is a key thing which I would like each one of you to do. This is my example which I have done, that you are open to listen. This is just an example I have shown. You can do on your own way, but be show your presence on LinkedIn so that will help So that's all for today. I think today's meeting has gone well. If anyone would like to talk to someone, something, let me open the unmute everyone. Let's speak one by one.
Se le acabaron.
Thank you.
Y ahora solo tiene el dibujo. Pues esta acá que dice que sí.
Just 1 minute.
Darshan sir,
Pues es lo que tienen.
And we are not able to hear you.
Yes, please.
your voice is not clear, Darshan.
Am I audible now?
Now, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully, so far, so good. You have done. Oh, still not?
No.
Oh,
Better
no.
than before, Darshan. Better than before, but
Okay.
not that clear.
Not that clear?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, hold it like that near your mouth, then you're clear.
Only
Okay.
again, and we need to prepare a page for presentation ourselves and share that presentation.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay. I think we have finished with the meeting. Probably let's stop for now.